What lurks behind this unassuming storefronts in Cleveland, Ohio? It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Learn the history of Wicca and the tale of those who brought it to the United States. See the tools of magic, once used by practitioners of the arcane arts. It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Welcome back to the Buckland Museum of, Buckland Museum Frankenstein radio controls. We're broadcasting out of a Universe B version of the Buckland Museum gift shop in the unknown wilds of forbidden Ohio. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with writer Damien Echols about his life, his work as a magician, and his books. Damien recently donated 4 talismans to the Buckland collection, and we want to get into the real nitty-gritty about that, as well as information about his latest book, Angels and Archangels. We'll talk about his book, High Magick, A Guide to the Spiritual Practices That Saved My Life on Death Row, and anything else that comes up. This is a live stream, so make sure that you put your questions in the comments. It makes it a little easier on me, so I don't have to come up with this stuff. But anyway, first, some business. We're going to have our first online workshop on Saturday, February 6th, dealing with spell work with our guest host, Judica Illis. Judica knows more about weaving spells than anyone I've ever met, so it's a thrill and an honor to host her here. We've been planning a live event with her for years, so we're pretty excited. I'll drop a link for the tickets somewhere below at some point during our talk here. The workshops are going to be monthly, as they can be. So in March, we're going to have Byron Ballard celebrating her new book. I think it's going to be some kind of Appalachian folk magic spells. And then in April, really thrilled to say that we're going to have Hagen von Tullian, the Berlin occult art master. He's going to do a primer on chaos magic. I've known Hagen for years and years. So really excited to see him, even though this is going to be virtual. Kind of hope to see him in Berlin this year, but pandemics. Due to the kindness of Stephen Romano Gallery, our show Apparitions now is open until mid-February. We're working on a follow-up show with Stephen soon. But if you haven't seen Apparitions, it's a must. It's we have things on display from the 1600s to 2020. And I really need a chance to thank Stephen for his donation of this piece here. When you come visit the museum, we'll go deep into it. So thank you, Stephen. And here we go with Damien Echols. Welcome to the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Thank you for having me.
So where am I talking to you at? Are you...
I am in New York, in Harlem, and this is actually my bedroom.
Oh, very cool. Excellent. Well, I got to say that the response of you being on here has been tremendous. People are so excited about it. I posted on my personal Facebook page, and I just laughed because just random people that I didn't think would even have any clue who you were like, that guy. No way. That's fantastic. I was strolling through my Instagram the other day, and just random people I know, your talismans are popping up in their timelines, and I just think that's just so incredible. Probably my favorite was a photo director when I used to work at a tattoo magazine in New York City, and there was one of your talismans, and I didn't know she had any interest in this stuff. Maybe she doesn't, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice.
So I have a question for you, and it's one that have you ever heard of our founder, Raymond Buckland?
have. His book, Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, was probably the very first book on witchcraft that I ever bought in my life.
Right. Wonderful. That's really fun to hear that. So many people come in here and they see the original manuscript for that book and they're just like, oh my gosh, I remember the day. Unfortunately, the other day somebody told me something that I didn't want to hear. They were like, I remember the day I shoplifted that from Walden Books. And I was like, come on, man, you don't have to tell me everything, you know? So that's pretty cool. So you remember that book, but when was your introduction to magic itself as something that you could experience?
It's really hard to pinpoint it just because it was kind of, I can remember the very first time I ever even heard the word magic. I was no older than, 6 or 7 years old. And whenever I heard it, I saw it, an ad in the back of like one of those really old tabloids from the late 70s, early 80s. And it was something, those little ads they used to put in the back that would say things like, if you want to learn the secrets of the universe, send $5.99 off to this address. And I saw that when I was, just learning how to read, really. And I had no idea what magic was or what it entailed. At that age, for all I knew, it could have been something to do with, like Harry Potter type stuff.
Right.
But even then, whenever I read it, it was like something went off in my head where I thought, this is what I want to be doing with my life. If you could dedicate your life to this, then what else matters? And, it would still be several years before I started to delve into it or anything. But even at that young of an age, I knew that this was what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
I probably a pretty similar experience. I just remember when I was a kid, we had the Scholastic book clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I remember those.
The only ones I was ever interested in were the UFO, the Bigfoot, the unexplained phenomenon, and stuff, implants.
Life series.
Yeah, and it's we didn't even have the benefit of things like Harry Potter back then. So
yep.
Imagine where we are here. So Angie Rivero says the Big Blue Book. Yeah, so many people's introduction. Would love to hear if that was your introduction out there in the world. Let's see. So you started experimenting with ceremonial magic. And I was curious, how would you define ceremonial magic versus other types of magic?
I think, I that's a really difficult question to answer. I think ceremonial magic is like the remnants of one of the earliest traditions known to mankind. It goes all the way back to ancient Sumer, basically astrotheurgy. And it's gotten, of course, over the of years since gotten really watered down, and we've tremendous amounts of what this original system was. And for me, I think ceremonial magic is really like the remnants, the pieces that we still have left of that tradition. And it's more, it's less of religion, of a system to help you transcend the need for things like religions. It's on basically activating the different levels and layers of your soul to full functioning, fully conscious being in the world. I think other kind of magic, you are focused on anything from like manifesting to kinds of different deities, and but at the same time, I think there can also be overlap.
So, Damien, we're getting a bit of like distortion here. So if I kick you out, can you follow that link to come back in? Sometimes that helps reset it.
I try it. Try
All
it and
right.
see if I can figure it
I'll
out.
try this again.
All
All right. So hopefully Damien comes back in a second. He's not like, yeah. So I'm looking at all the comments here, and there's so much chit chat between everyone. Damien, I'm looking at the comments we have here, and there's so much chit chat between everyone here. And I'm wondering if these are perhaps people from your Patreon community.
I do see a few that I recognize there. Yes.
That's cool, because one of the things I really want to ask about is, what does your Patreon community mean to you? Like, it seems that it's a really tight-knit group, and I find that really inspiring, really.
It is, and it's also, to be honest, just fun. You know, especially during times like this, pandemic times, whenever you are able to actually practice with people from all over the world. You know, there are people on there from Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, the Philippines, you know, all over the world. So you get to practice together in real time, even in your own home, which is kind of amazing. Stuff like this didn't exist when I was growing up. And I'm still learning how to use a lot of it, you know, technology. But it kind of blows my mind just what it's possible to do now, sitting in your own house.
Yeah, that's when you had announced the Talismans being here at the Buckland Museum. I loved seeing the reaction of a lot of people, because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I helped charge those, and now they're at the museum," which I think is pretty rad.
It is, yeah. Well, we had started like a project where we were going to be working on talismans anyway. You know, we go through different things, you know, like it could be, you know, things like using candles and herbs and stuff like that, you know, correspondences. And then we had started the Talisman Project. And that's whenever you guys asked if I would contribute something to the museum. And I thought, well, let's contribute something that we're all participating in anyway. So it's not just mine, it's sort of the whole Patreon community's contribution.
Yeah. How very cool. So somebody here, I don't know if I can pronounce her name, Exotic James, says the Patreon is worth every penny. All right.
Thank you.
So we have a true billionaire here. Sabina, it's fun and a safe space for us. Well, that's cool. I mean, the world's on fire, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We need a place where we can all gather together.
Exactly.
All right. So my friend Theodore pointed out something fun here. Daryl the Fish, Midnight Gospel, episode 3. So that's so during my intro, I point out the different sections of the collection. We talk about the ancient origins of witchcraft and magic. We go with some things that Ray had collected of Gerald Gardner's. We show Ray's original coven, his original ritual tools. We have a space for elders in the craft, as well as artifacts, tools of witchcraft. We have an herbalism section called 6660s. And then we get to yours, which is kind of the ceremonial magic section. And it's fun because it seems like the people that know you, because I've been kind of talking about you just a bit during that part, they're like, "Is that the Midnight Gospel guy?" And I think that's pretty cool. So it's what was that like?
That was kind of an amazing experience, just because when I had never heard of Dan Trussell before I met him. He just do his podcast when I was promoting High Magick. And whenever I first went in, I didn't know what to expect, because he answered the door. I show up at his house where he records the podcast, and he opens the door and he's wearing like a fireman's hat that says "On Fire for Jesus." And the first thing I thought was, they sent me to the wrong address. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. But whenever we went in and we started talking, it ended up being one of my absolute favorite interview I've ever done, just because of Duncan himself. I mean, it was a really amazing experience. And after that, I told him, anytime you want to do anything whatsoever, just contact me. So whenever he started doing Midnight Gospel, he asked if I would be interested in doing an episode. And I immediately said, absolutely. I had anything like that before. I had to go to a recording studio, and we had to do things like ad lib fighting, things that I had no experience with whatsoever, but I ended up absolutely loving it. And I think it's also introduced a lot of people who didn't even know that magic existed. A lot of people that when they would hear the word magic, they would think it's some sort of Harry Potter thing or some sort of fantasy type situation. People that had no idea that this is a real, spiritual tradition, and it's introduced a whole new world of people to this subject through a cartoon.
Yeah, which that's it's interesting. It's a fun watch visually, and also the information you get from it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So my guests here probably know Maja Dawu from the we had a show of her work earlier this year, but she was telling me that she was part of the writers' room on the show, and said it was really, really, really neat and cool. So
Excellent.
I love that so much. Just new ways of getting the information out there.
Absolutely.
So, I came across your comment. We talked about ceremonial magic, but we should probably have talked about magic first, because we have the Crowley concept of what magic is, the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will, right? But you've updated a little bit, and with the idea of magic as the art and practice of conscious evolution and consciousness evolution. And I have to say that your statement there really helped me evolve my own idea of what magic is.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Well, part of what we're doing, you can use these techniques for things like, manifesting, or, doing like what Crowley said, causing change and conformity with will, things like that. But they're almost like side effects or benefits that come along with the main practice. What we're actually trying to do is, like when we think of the soul in modern day terminology, it's very, very different from what cultures throughout the history of the world have described the soul as. Now we tend to think of it as one thing, almost like a ghost that lives in the body in one piece. But throughout all these different cultures, they've always said that the soul consisted of parts. Like people are familiar with in ancient Egypt, they would say that the soul is made of the Ba and the Ka, but they also subdivided it so that you had several more parts of the soul. What we're trying to do in ceremonial magic, in astrotheurgy, is activate all those different parts of the soul so that we come back into, whenever you do incarnate back into this world, you bring back as much of what the progress that you've already made in this lifetime, you bring it with you so that you aren't starting over from scratch. And ultimately what you're trying to do, I always think Beethoven said it strangely enough. You usually don't think of Beethoven when you think of esoteric subjects, but he said at one point that the point of existence is to get as close as you possibly can to divinity, gather its rays, and then disseminate them out to mankind. And that's exactly what we're trying to do whenever we're doing these practices. We are accumulating this energy, which we then want to basically disseminate out to make not just our own lives a better place, but the entire world.
All right. Excellent. I think that's something to chew on. So your latest book, Angels and Archangels?
Yes. That.
So that one made me a little nervous. All right.
Mhm.
Because I was just like, oh, geez. But, you know, as somebody that grew up, you know, teaching myself the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and all that, I understand the need for angel magic, but it also, I'm not always so quick to have that sort of stuff like around me. And I know that it's just my own personal hang-ups that I have to work through.
I had those too, by the way. I experienced that same thing.
I bet you had that a bit more than I did in a lot of ways, you know, because me, I just get stalked, but in some ways you got hunted down, right? So it's, but sorry, I'm thinking about that. So tell me about an angel. What's an angel?
Angels are, you know what, as strange as this sounds, I think a friend of mine described it perfectly one time when he said, angels are the litter of the universe. Basically, angels are energy personified, is all they are. Archangels are a little bit different. There's more of an intelligence, a guiding intelligence inherent in archangels. But angels are basically the substance that the entire universe is made out of. You know, we know now that if you took, I mean, everything in the universe that exists, all the planets, all the stars, everything that there is, that still only accounts for a tiny, minute amount of the energy that scientists now know that the universe is made of. I mean, it's something like 1% of the universe. So you're trying to figure out what is that other 99%? You know, what is this substance that we're beginning to understand is there, but that we don't know what it's doing. We don't know what its job is. That's what angels are. And it's that substance that we take into ourselves. Basically, when you're doing angel magic, you are consuming angels, since they are this energy. Whenever you're invoking them, you know, even when you start with something like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, essentially what happens whenever you invoke those angels around you is throughout the day, you will gradually absorb them as a kind of spiritual sustenance. That's why when you're doing these practices, they have an effect on your consciousness. You know, anybody who's done these practices for any length of time, you know, consistently realizes they're changing. So the way they think about things change, the way they feel about things change, they become more grounded, more stable, all of those sorts of things. That's because you are consuming that energy as a form of spiritual sustenance, and it causes a transformation of consciousness. So angels are essentially just the energy that the universe is made of, that science does not completely understand yet, but is just starting to learn about. And they are food, if that makes sense.
It does. So I'm going to ask you a bit of a personal question here. Now, when you were in prison and you were performing magic and you were doing things like the lesser banishing ritual of pentagram and things like that. So here in the museum, it's one room where we have our gallery. A lot of times I'll come in and I'll start the day and I'll do something like that. But, you know, I got neighbors upstairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, you know, really, really trying to like make all the atoms in the universe vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like to the people next door?
That was one of the things when I was in prison that I had to learn to do silently, and not only to do like silently and internally, but also, you know, like all the grand gestures that go along with some of these rituals, like the analysis of the keyword. Exactly. You don't want to be doing that stuff in the middle of a prison barracks. You know, stuff like that. Exactly. You know, people are going to think you're insane, and then they're going to pump you full of drugs, and you're going to walk around doing the Thorazine shuffle for the next 20 years. So you learn ways to do all of that stuff without drawing attention to yourself. a lot of internal type things. And still, I guess I did it for so long that way when I was in prison that it kind of carried over. And even for me out here now, I rarely do anything out loud anymore. And I think that that's part of it also. When we first start learning magic, you have to learn all of those things, all of those formulas, things like that. But eventually you will get to the point after years and years and years where you won't need those things anymore to be able to accomplish the same goal. A friend of mine one time said that, for example, you could have a novice or a neophyte who's, it takes them hours and hours to accumulate as much of the energy, to accumulate the same amount of energy that it would only take that someone who has been doing this for years could accomplish by doing something as simple as like twisting a ring on their finger. So I think a lot of people, as the years go by, some people do it forever, out loud and keep making all the big gestures. But I think other people find almost like shorthand ways of doing it. And my situation forced me to learn those shorthand ways.
Yeah, I imagine so. Because I was thinking about that and I was like, oh my gosh. They up there, they thought I was a nut. I can't even imagine. Like you said, pump you full of Thorazine. So, let's see. We have a question here. Do the talismans in the museum remain programmed and charged if the LBRP is performed in the museum? I would not see any reason why they wouldn't be.
Yeah, why not?
And let's see here. Angels are psyche, same as our demons. Let's see. Will you ask Damien to speak on the Llamas?
That was basically what the Llamas were the very first portrayals or depictions of archangels in the history of the world. They go all the way back to ancient Sumer, and you hear them referenced in, throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament. But basically what they are, they are a tetramorph. They are one creature made by combining other creatures. And the Llamas are made up of a lion, a bull, a man, and an eagle. And what they represent are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. The lion is Leo, the bull is Taurus, the man is Aquarius, and the eagle, most people, whenever they think of Scorpio, think of a scorpion. But the eagle and what is the other sign of? The phoenix are also symbols of Scorpio. So basically, a Lamasu is just the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac that Judaism would later turn into the cherubs or the cherubim. And then you see them pop up again in Christianity as like the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Essentially what they are, right now, and art was never seen in the past the way it is now. In the past, in these ancient civilizations, all the way up until the Renaissance, art was seen as more like a way to crystallize information and pass it on to future generations. They knew times would come whenever people did not speak the same language that they did anymore. People couldn't read the same language that they did anymore. But if you could figure out how to decipher the iconography, you could still get access to this information. So that's why they created all this stuff. Sometime after the Renaissance, art became more about like cultural cannibalism, like political commentary or people talking about expressing their feelings or opinions on different matters. But essentially what the Lamasu are crystallized information that was meant to last for as long as humanity is here. And it has, to this day, you can still go in museums and see all of this stuff. And if you spend enough time studying it, you can start to figure out what all of this stuff means. To me, I think they are one of the most invaluable pieces of human history that we still have left to us.
So, yeah, so that's a good answer there. So we should probably talk about the talismans themselves for the collection. Can you kind of, we have a bunch of people here that know all about them, but we also have a bunch of people out here that are watching this this is the first that they're hearing about it. So what exactly was the Talisman's Project that we are hearing a part of?
Well, it was, I thought, like you said on Patreon, it's a pretty, not only tightly knit group, but people are really excited and hungry to do magic. And I thought, how many times in life do you have the opportunity to have 100, 150 people at a time contributing to a ritual of some sort? And I thought, here it is. We have this opportunity where we can all invest massive amounts of energy into projects that's going to benefit all of us as a group. So I thought, well, if we have this at our disposal, then why not start using it? And it's been an absolutely tremendous experience in a lot of ways. I'll give you an example of one thing. Other than the Talisman Project, one thing that we started doing was I asked everyone if they would participate with me in a ritual to get a new apartment somewhere in a part of town where I would actually have access to a place where we could start doing, classes, like real world classes together, small classes. About 150 people contributed to that ritual. And within 3 weeks, I had a new apartment with a space where I will be able to do classes. And it was the same thing with the Talismans. It's like, this is a real functioning magical group that's going on there. Not just people that are, showing up and reading stuff or, debating philosophies or anything like that. These are people who are actually putting energy into doing things. And it's kind of amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's super amazing. It's Grant Morrison, the comic book writer. It's the first real big giant group ritual I remember is when he saved his comic, The Invisibles, and kept it from being canceled when everybody charged the sigil. Mm-hmm. And it's cool because, that was stuff in the back of a comic's letter page. And now it's like continuing on in other ways, like digital forms of communication and stuff. And
I always think stuff like that is one of the reasons it's so great, is because when people do stuff like that and they see that they see what they're doing magic for come to pass, mm-hmm. It's one of those things where you're like, oh my God, this is real. This isn't just mind games. This isn't just psychology. This is actually, so things like that build your faith. And I think the more faith you have, the better your magic works in the future. So I think it's good for that sort of thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I use my magic, like my personal practice very sparingly. But when I do, for that sort of thing, I'm always just like, of course this worked out, because has not,
Exactly, yeah. It gets to the point where you would be more shocked if it didn't work out than you are when it does.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the proof is in the pudding, right?
Exactly.
The proof is in the success, right?
Yeah.
So the success is your proof. So yeah. So Pedro says, "Oh my gosh, so happy to hear about the new apartment. That is great.
Thank you."
So Hope says, "I'm gonna join the Patreon because I have an idea." That's great. We've made some good friends, which is rare in magic. I don't know. It's the thing is like everybody that enjoys magic is part of a secret brother/sisterhood, right? So Brandon, good pal of ours here. Everybody send some good vibes to
whatever's going on out there.
Yeah. Would love to hear Damien's thoughts on LBRP versus Star Ruby. So Brandon, you're getting into the weeds a bit here, but I'd love to hear it too. So
Thelema is not my specialty. Basically, the only places that I've really delved deeply into Crowley's work are places where it overlaps with astrotheurgy. He said basically that what he was trying to do was reconstruct or recreate or bring back this ancient Sumerian tradition. but he wasn't really able to do that in a lot of ways, just because, keep in mind that Sumer wasn't even rediscovered until like the 1930s. And he wrote the Book of the Law in 1904, I think it was. So, they did not even begin to discover a lot of this stuff until well after he had done a lot of his work. And even then, it would be several more years before they started to like decipher the tablets, the cuneiform tablets that they found. So it really hampered his ability to recreate or reconstruct the system in a lot of ways, just because of the time period that he lived in. So the only things that I am really familiar with in Crowley's work are the things that do relate to what I myself do. I did not even know, for example, I always thought the star ruby could only be used for banishing. I didn't know that it could also be used as an invoking. And someone told me recently, no, you can actually also use it for an invoking. So I don't have a lot of practice or familiarity with the star ruby or a lot of Crowley's other stuff. But for me, and just like the, magicians of the past, they always said that the LBRP is the foundation of ceremonial magic. You have to learn that, and you have to be able to do it forwards, backwards, and inside out before you can move on to, the bigger things, like say the shim operation or the supreme invoking of the pentagrams, all of that sort of stuff. I honestly think the LBRP is probably the single most important thing in magic to learn, just because while you're learning it, you're also learning all of these different formulas that you can use in a million other ways that you don't even realize at first.
Yeah, I agree. It's what are your thoughts on, all right, I go through these periods, all right, where every day I come here, I go into the gallery space, every morning I do it, and this goes on for months and months, and just one day I don't. All right. So one day I'm just like, I got some other stuff I got to do. And then that breaks it. And then it takes me weeks, days, weeks, sometimes months before I get back into it.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for like motivation for the daily or like the consistent practice? Because that's something that I struggle with. I don't want to struggle with it, but I could always use some advice on just keep going.
I think it's one of those things where you just really have to remind yourself and think about the difference in your life and how you feel and how just things flow and how things move when you are doing these practices every day. And whenever you do stop doing them, I've learned from firsthand experience, I enjoy life much, much more whenever I am doing these practices versus when I'm not. But that doesn't mean, there are times whenever I guess the only way I know how to say it is you lose the joy. It becomes like rote. It becomes repetition. It's like doing push-ups. You think, I don't want to do this for the millionth time today. But if you stick with it, if you just force yourself to keep doing it, the joy does eventually come back. The excitement and all of that stuff does return. But I understand what you're talking about, just because, I did this stuff every single day when I was in prison. By the time I got out, I was doing it for like 8 hours a day. And then whenever I got out, I had a complete and absolute nervous breakdown, because I went from being in solitary confinement for a decade to being out on the streets of Manhattan, like literally overnight. And it shattered me to the point where I could not do these practices for probably at least 2 years. I mean, wow. I went from doing it for 8 hours to not even being able to do it for 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And part of it is I just had to let myself heal for a long time and see the way my life started to deteriorate when I wasn't doing these things. And I don't know what it is that makes you start back. To be honest, for me, it was whenever I started to write High Magick, like not only could I not do magic anymore whenever I got out, but I could not read. Like I would read the same page over and over and couldn't retain the information when I got to the bottom of the page. Or I couldn't watch television because I could not follow the plot. I would meet someone several times and not be able to remember them, even if we had had dinner before. So whenever Sounds True asked me if I would want to do this book on High Magick, I said yes, even though I couldn't write anymore. You know, I couldn't read, I couldn't write, any of those things. And whenever I went into the studio, basically what made me start doing magic again was it almost felt like being in a car wreck whenever you see it coming at you in slow motion and you start praying with everything you've got, please don't let me hit the guardrail. That's what I thought. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to fail. And it also was, I wanted to do a book on magic my whole life. When I was a kid, to me, I thought that was the be all and the end all. If you could contribute something to the body of literature that is magic, then you had made it, so to speak.
A lot of people do that, but you have contributed a couple books of sheer, good, solid work. I have to commend you on that.
Thank you. It was magic that allowed me to start writing and creating again.
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding there.
Yeah.
So, Beniza says sometimes a plateau can lead to breakthroughs. I found that true. Mm-hmm. Let's see. The ego sees its imminent dissolution and comes back at anything that will get you there. So it thinks up ways to distract you from simple and daily practice.
That's true.
Yeah. That is very correct.
Yeah.
So, I always hear this quote by a magician named Lon Milo Duquette in my head. And it's all in your head. You just don't know how big your head is. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you would ascribe to? Or do you feel that out there in the universe, there really are forces that are guiding us? Or is it something in here that we tie? Or is that just like one of the great mysteries? And
I think it's one of the great mysteries, to be honest, because I've seen things that would, if I've seen things that would lead me to believe it's one way, and I've experienced things that would lead me to believe it's another way. And some things, there's just no way to tell if this is an internal thing or if it's an external thing. But more and more, the older I get and the more years of practice that go by, I tend to think it is far more internal than external, even if it doesn't seem like it. Like, for example, whenever people are doing something like in magic, what they call attaining the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, whenever that first happens, and Crowley did the same thing, he swore that it was an outside entity that was feeding him information, because it was information that he had no knowledge of, had no way of possibly knowing. And that is very much what it seems like. But whenever you progress past that, whenever you experience the wedding with the holy guardian angel, where you realize, oh, it was me the whole time, once again, it becomes really, really hard to distinguish or differentiate between what's internal and what's external. Because it's one of those things where, like I said, it's at that point, when you get to the wedding phase, when you merge with it, when you become one, you realize it's me the whole time. It still leaves the question of, well, where did all of that information come from then? All of those downloads, all of that stuff that you received and that you saw and that you experienced. Okay, I accept that now it was part of me, but where did all of that come from? Because like the ancient Sumerian stuff, for example, the stuff that I started to receive, I dropped out of school when I was in junior high school. I never even graduated 9th grade. I have an 8th grade education. I had never even heard of any of this stuff whenever I started to learn about it. So it's a really, really difficult thing to say.
Yeah, that's I have a pretty similar take on that. It's yeah, cool. So let's see here. I just want to show some of the talismans that you sent here. These have been really, really fun to share with the world. It's you know, we really have the best guests that come in here at the Buckland Museum, and I always say that because it's a witchcraft museum, right? And the jerks are going to go somewhere else. You know, it's like you have to have an open mind to walk into the witch museum. So, looking at these, what can our visitors kind of expect to take home with them when they gaze upon these?
Well, what we were trying to do on Patreon is just like we were all putting energy into it. I mean, you know, one of the things people a lot of times will say something like, well, if I don't need anything, you know, like say, for example, I'm financially stable, so I don't need to do magic for prosperity, or I'm in a stable relationship, so I don't need to do magic for love. You know, they say I have all of these material things I need. What do I do magic for then? The main thing to do magic for, and that I did over and over and over when I was in prison, I would say protect, guide, and illuminate me on my journey through life and on the path of high magic. That was the main ritual that I would do over and over and over. So, and we're doing that on Patreon a lot. So we thought it would be kind of great if other people could contribute energy to that as well. You know, not just the 150 or so people that were doing it on Patreon, but anyone who actually came into the museum and looked at those talismans, if they wanted to partake in the ritual. It's not like something that just happened, you know, a year ago or whatever. It's something that is ongoing, that anyone who comes in, we wanted it to be something that people could contribute to and share in and be part of that energy and that community as well.
Really, really, really love that idea. That's really cool. So, Damien, none of this stuff exists in a vacuum. All right. There's books that I refer back to over and over again, but I'm always seeking new titles. I'm trying to figure out what's new that can kind of blow my mind, be it something that's got published in 2020, 2021, or something that got published 20 years ago and I just finally found it now. But what is there anything that you're looking at now that you're is helping you kind of like continue this adventure? Like, what's Damien Echols' reading list look like?
You know, I honestly do not even read books on magic anymore, really, unless it's, you know, like a friend that wants me to review the book or something like that, then I'll read it. But I think what happened a couple of years ago or so, I started doing tours at the Met and learning about all of the ancient Sumerian artifacts and what everything meant, you know, the iconography. And it's like Dion Fortune said, you know, she said, the closer the source, the purer the stream. And when you have access to the source, you know, to the original place where this stuff all originated, and you can start to study that and look at that, then you really do start to lose interest in, you know, like all of the stuff that comes along later, the modern stuff. So for me, you know, one of the things that I like to express to people is there are many, many ways and many places and many avenues that you can learn about magic beyond things like reading books or watching YouTube videos. You can actually go to museums and visit some of these temples that are still there to this day and be in the presence of these magical artifacts that were used, you know, by magicians for thousands of years, and just sort of go there and bathe in that energy. So that became more of what started to appeal to me versus, you know, just like reading and studying.
Well, somebody that operates a museum, I have to say that I like your style there, Damien.
Museums, I think, are one of the most incredible places on earth when it comes to learning about magic. I mean, think about just like the museum where you're at, the Buckland Museum. I mean, think about all the different aspects of magic and witchcraft and paganism and everything else that somebody could experience in a 30-minute time period versus, like the 2 weeks it's going to take to read a book on one subject. It gives you like a bigger, broader overview.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah, Patreon field trip to the museum. I would love it. When we travel again, you're going to come hang out with us here, right?
That would be great. Yeah.
So love to visit the Buckland. I'm too far away. Sabina, come on. There's no boundaries in the magical world, right? It's people come through Cleveland all the time that I imagine probably never had any idea that they'd ever come through here. Mm-hmm. And they're always like, I'm going to go see the Witch Museum. So Hope K says, where is it? Ohio? It is in Ohio. Cleveland, home of rock and roll. So let's see. As a visitor of the Buckland Museum, I can say that the energy boosted my magical practices in a very real way. That a lot. That is so cool to hear. I love that. Well, Sabina, I've been to Ireland. You've got to come here to the Buckland Museum here in Cleveland. So, are you familiar with I hear you talk about astrotheology a lot. Are you familiar with the great Acharya S?
No.
She was a writer. She was kind of like one of the first real astrotheology books that I read. And a lot of Sumerian stuff, etc. Really weaving in just how pretty much everything is, it's the stars and it's the constellations that pretty much control us to this day, and certain people that believe that there's still secret cabals of people that look to the stars to control what we're doing here, which maybe not. I wouldn't be surprised though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what's new? Got anything you're working on?
What am I working? Well, I'm actually working on a few things, actually. One of them is with a friend of mine. I'm working on a magician's Bible. And what we want to do is take the actual Bible and go through and explain it all from a magical perspective as opposed to just a religious perspective. So that's one thing I'm doing. Just people don't realize how much magic is in the Bible. Just things like Daniel and the Lion's Den. Like people will try to tell you that magic is unbiblical or anti-Christian or all this sort of thing. And it tells you in the Bible that Daniel was not only a magician, it says he was the master of magicians. So what I want to do is go through and just explain all that from, the perspective of magic and astrotheurgy. Another thing that I'm doing with my wife right now is we're working on a book together where it's the point of it is basically to show you how to make every single aspect of your life a ritual that contributes to, your spiritual sustenance, your growth, your development, the expansion of consciousness, basically so that you use every single thing that you do during the day as a connection to the divine instead of, just going through your routine mindlessly.
I have to say that your wife, Lorri, seems extraordinarily lovely. I have she's kind of helped bridge us here communication-wise and very helpful. And I think it's so cool that you found such a rad partner.
She pretty much runs my entire life so that I can focus. I mean, it's kind of amazing because it allows me to focus pretty much all of my time and attention on doing magic. In a lot of ways, I still to this day live very much almost like a monk or a priest. I realized when I was in prison that when I lived my life that way, dedicated entirely to magic, that's when I am the happiest. That's when I am the most fulfilled. That's when I'm the most content. So one of the things that allowed me to start healing, you know, like I said a while ago when I had the nervous breakdown, one of the things that allowed me to start healing was whenever I did get back to dedicating my entire daily life just to doing magic. And she's a big part of what allowed me to do that.
That's really sweet to hear. Bonisa says Damien in the Gospels is also a killer band name. I have to agree. Let's see. Madeline says the relationship between the Bible and mysticism, fascinating. What's the guy's name? David Smith, the artist out of Brooklyn. I listened to an occult personality podcast where he went through Kabbalistic view of the of Genesis, right, in the Garden of Eden. And the whole time I was pretty much just like, my mind blown was by every sentence he uttered. So you may want to explore some of his work.
Really? It makes a lot more sense. You know, when you're reading the Bible, a lot of times people will think, how in the hell could anyone take this seriously? You know, it makes a lot more sense whenever you approach it from this direction, this angle, and with this information versus, you know, people who actually, you know, believe in like a talking snake, that sort of thing. Right. You know, it brings it all into perspective.
There's been times in my life where I think I've probably talked to some snakes, but that's just me. Cool. Well, we've been chatting for an hour. I have so many more questions for you, so maybe you'll come hang out with us sometime.
I would love to.
Here.
I would absolutely
prefer it face to face, right? But
yeah.
You know, one day the pandemic will be over, and we're going to miss the glory days of when we didn't have to go do anything. We could just hang out at home. You know, you know, it's always one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody that's watching, thank you so much. I've been watching these Beastie Boys reaction videos where all the people reacting to these videos are like, make sure that you like and subscribe. You don't really have to do that. But if you come back and hang out with us again someday, that would be great. If you're ever in the Cleveland area, make sure that you stop by the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Yes. And Damien, I'll be right back here. So thanks for everybody that tuned in. Really awesome. My partner in the museum, Tony Rotunda, she is speaking with some people here, the Outer Realms, but I don't have a link for it. Let's see. newmystics.com. I don't know where they do this from. I am so... Okay, well, maybe I'll put a link in the comments. Everybody out there tuning in, we got John Fell Ryan, 1 sub 1 prayer. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? All right, everyone, stay witchy, my friends.